6 months or
Yeah,
something
just
like
about
that. Yeah. And so Ed Macmillan, as you, we put on our golden book. No, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, to be here today in Geneva. We had already some exchanges about Swiss architecture. You appreciate
I'm
a
learning
lot.
from your Swiss architecture. I'm taking some ideas home
Yeah.
to Charleston.
So thanks for being here and giving this meeting with the local representative of the media. Before to give you the floor, I would ask you to sign our golden book.
Yes.
Just
Any pen, my pen?
yeah, or just here
Okay.
below. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. And the idea is, as usual, to give you the floor for an introducing
Great.
speech, and after to
Great.
go ahead with questions.
Okay. Well, hello to everybody who's here and everybody who's out in Etherland. I'm sorry you didn't make it to Geneva because it's a beautiful day. So I want to thank you, Guy Matin, for and the Geneva Press Club for the invitation to be here and to be able to interact with you and meet some of you who I've not met already. I'm honored to join the likes of Secretary Henry Kissinger, who I've actually had the honor of meeting and knowing.
There's a photo there. Yeah.
Yes, the Dalai Lama. I mean, I've seen the photos. It's truly amazing, some of the people who've been here before, and it's a great honor to be here with you all. As the ambassador from the United States to Switzerland and to Liechtenstein, it's truly a great honor to represent the President of the United States and the people of the United States here in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. It's a long time experience that I've had over the years, spending time in Switzerland as a young man and actually really getting to know the country in a way that tourists from the U.S. always do, right? We ski, we have great food, we gain weight and enjoy ourselves throughout Switzerland, eating all the good carbs and cheeses and the wonderful cuisine of Switzerland. But to be here in this capacity is a very different one. And I want to say, tell you a little bit about myself. In my early years as a young man, skiing with my family, my wife and I came right after our marriage because I told her it was one of the most important places in my life that I wanted her to experience. And she fell in love with Switzerland just like I did many years before. And so we are really honored to be here, the amazing people, the beauty of the country. But then the opportunity that I had in 1995 to actually come as an exchange program through the American Swiss Foundation, the Young Leaders Conference, which brings together 20 Americans and Swiss participants between the ages of 30 and 40 as they're starting their careers. We were given the opportunity to come and live in Switzerland for 2 weeks, nearly 2 weeks, and travel throughout the country to meet media people that were in the media. All of us were from different backgrounds: media, politics, business, academia, and we got to truly know each other and interact and learn about our cultures. And we didn't just go and see the castles and the beautiful places of Switzerland. We actually sat down at night and had sessions where we were forced to talk about issues and talk about things that were important to our countries. And so it was the beginning, again, of a major affinity for the things that Switzerland and the U.S. have in common. While I grew up in New York, I also have, I married a South Carolinian, and for those who know the South and how the Southern families love to stay at home, there was no way I was moving back to New York after I married Margaret Ann. And so after college, we worked in Washington for a short period of time and went back to South Carolina, where I founded and ran my firm, an advertising firm for corporate clients. And From there, it was pretty clear that politics always interested me and issues always interested me, and I was always engaged in public policy issues. So it was a real amazing opportunity when President knew that after the election that I had this great affinity for Switzerland and understood the people and the culture and the business community. And he knew that this was a very important country for the U.S. He's very well aware how important Switzerland is to the U.S. regarding so many issues and so many fronts that I'll talk about in just a minute. But I can tell you that when I was offered the opportunity to be ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein, I was very honored, and it was truly a culmination of my life's experiences, my interests, and my ability to really work and give back as a public servant. So I've taken on that challenge, and I'm honored and really grateful to have it, because I've seen in the short time that I've been here really serious progress in just 6 months on some of the confusion, some of the lack of information, some of the void of information and misrepresentation of the president's policies. So I think we've been giving a really amazing opportunity to travel and clarify and make clear what the agenda is, because it's a very positive agenda for both our countries. So I said I arrived at an opportune time excuse me, in our country's histories. Our global economy is not only growing again, but also changing rapidly. And the U.S. and Swiss economies are particularly well positioned to contribute to and benefit from this prosperous world and time. There are a few facts that I'd like to share with you to give you some perspective on our relationship between the two countries. In global innovation rankings, Switzerland and the United States rank among the top 5 most innovative countries. In the World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Index, Switzerland and the United States are number 1 and 2, respectively. Of course, the U.S. is working hard to regain that number 1 spot, and we're going to try to give you the hardest challenge we can to get it. But it's important to see that there are very similar roles for both countries in that sphere. I think if you look at the larger story, that our countries truly do share some very important principles. The commitment to free enterprise, our longstanding traditions for innovation, and our entrepreneurial spirits. And these are underpinned by some very deeply rooted common values of democracy, decentralized power, freedom of the press, and individual responsibility. All of these factors contribute to our vibrant bilateral economic ties. Our two-way trade relationship in goods and services currently tops $100 billion a year. Two-way trade in goods and services tops $100 billion a year for this little country called Switzerland in the United States. It's pretty substantial. I love to see the reaction from people in the United States when they say, so you're going off to eat cheese and chocolate in Switzerland and enjoy the mountains and ski. And little do they know how serious this job really is, because it is a serious job when you look at the president's objectives. And one of the first things I learned, which really shocked me, was that Switzerland has the 7th largest foreign direct investment in the United States. And it's outpacing many of the largest allies that we have, several of them. That's a pretty substantial statement, and it's one of the things that I think the president and the administration truly understand that makes this country so important to the United States. It also is important to recognize that the Swiss companies in the United States employ almost 500,000 people in the United States. And these jobs are extremely well-paying jobs. They're high-tech jobs. They're the new future of our economy. And they have a very important role in the U.S. economy. And I will tell you, too, another very important figure, if you look at it, is that Switzerland is the United States' largest direct investor when it comes to research and development. Again, the new technology, the new business model that is growing rapidly. And that's a very important factor when you look at our economies. I mentioned earlier that I arrived in Switzerland at an opportune time. In January, we hosted President Trump at Davos the World Economic Forum, and many members of his cabinet. I think it was a record number of the cabinet from Washington that came, who did not just sit around and enjoy the parties. They were actually engaged in serious bilateral conversations, serious interaction with their counterparts from around the world, and they achieved a great deal of success in those conversations. And it was the first time in 18 years that a president of the United States has actually been in Switzerland. So I am really honored to have been ambassador to help work with our president as he worked with the Swiss government through the bilateral agreement, the bilateral conversation that we had, which was truly, it couldn't have gone better with President Berset. We had Mr. Schneider-Ammann, Mr. Cassis, and then on our side of the table, some of our leaders from the U.S., all of whom sat down and I think were having a very frank and honest discussion about trade and the issues that foreign direct investment, the issues that are so important to our countries for economic cooperation. And I know that the president walked away from that meeting extremely pleased, impressed, and even more informed as he was extremely prepared and informed for that conversation. And I know that the Swiss counterparts felt that they were much more able to understand where this president was coming from. And I think Davos also, in a broader sense, gave us, the administration, excuse me, an excellent opportunity to discuss the broader economic agenda of the president's, the tax reform, regulatory relief, and a more balanced approach to trade, all of which are making the United States even more attractive for business investment and innovation. While we're only at the beginning and have plenty of work ahead, I think the Trump administration has already made a positive mark on the U.S. economy. And I'll give you just a few examples to illustrate that. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has cut America's corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. It is a realignment of everything that others have talked about, and in the last 30 years, we've finally seen some serious tax reforms that have put us in a great position for competitiveness internationally. I think if you look at, he also lowered the individual income tax rates as well to help hardworking families, and they're seeing the benefits of those tax cuts as their incomes and salaries are improved. On regulatory relief, the Trump administration far exceeded what it promised. When the president ran, he said that for every new regulation, he would cut 2 regulations. In reality, the past year, the president has actually, for every new regulation, cut 22 regulations, another reset for our economic competitiveness that has truly inspired more interest from international investment to come into the U.S. and build out their businesses with those new opportunities. That regulatory change has created more than $8.1 billion in present value cost savings in the U.S. economy. It is substantial. And on trade, the president has pursued an agenda that promotes free and balanced trade. We're looking at our trade agreements to determine whether the benefits are reciprocal and renegotiating if we need to rebalance in line with U.S. national security. And the president I know personally to be a strong free trader. But I also know that he understands fairness and reciprocity. He is a businessman. He would never enter into any negotiation where he didn't get a balanced approach to the compromise or the agreement. And in the end, he is very serious about reciprocity, very serious about the impact of certain trading partners, and ensuring that we do have free and fair and balanced trade. Thanks in large part to these initiatives, the U.S. unemployment is at a 17-year low, and U.S. GDP growth is robust, and business and consumer confidence levels are at the highest we've seen, not to mention the U.S. stock markets at an all-time high not seen in decades. Since the election, we have seen 3 million new jobs in the United States created. That's a pretty impressive number, and you can feel the difference when you're in the U.S., particularly in areas of the country that have felt the effects of the recession the hardest. The president is not a status quo politician. He is focused like a businessman and a laser beam on those people he promised that he would bring them into the economy, help build their jobs, and help reinvent the economy in a way that can bring them into that economy and make them successful and prosperous in the new economy that we face in the U.S. And while the President's policies are focused on strengthening the U.S. economy, I think this progress is clearly shared more broadly. When the world's largest economy is vibrant and growing, our trade and investment partners, including Switzerland and Liechtenstein, are benefiting as well. Many say, as goes the U.S. economy, so goes Europe. And I think the European economies are building as well and interacting with the U.S. in ways that will continue to see that growth over time. It's a really exciting time to be here as ambassador to Switzerland. When it comes to our broader U.S. policy goals, it's important to remember what the President did say in Davos, because this is one area where I think great misrepresentation and misunderstanding occurred, when the President made it clear that America first is not America alone. You see it today, this past couple days, as President Macron visits the United States, the commitment to our allies and to our European NATO allies and keeping close, and our partners, not just our allies. Switzerland is a partner. Other neutral countries are partners in this important endeavor to keep our countries safe. And the President's national security strategy that he released in December, he underscored that the United States is safer when Europe is prosperous and stable and can help defend our shared interests and ideals. Our relationships with Switzerland and Liechtenstein fall clearly within the President's focus on Europe, and I'm proud to be able to work with Switzerland, the government, and its people to continue that. I've spoken with many members of the press about all of these issues over the past 6 months. And in the few months that I've been here, I've been interviewed by radio, by television, and print journalists from Italian, German, Romansh, and French-speaking outlets, including Geneva's own RTS, Le Temps, Tribune de Genève, and others. And I have been incredibly impressed with the media here in Switzerland, both by the skills and professionalism of your journalists and by the way the Swiss public demands balanced information. The population here expects a fair coverage, and they get it. You have been fair yet direct with me, and I am thankful for that, with that professionalism. It is truly, I think, what makes a free press work well. A free press is critical for democracy, but as we all know, democracy is not always pretty. The discussions can be contentious, but it is important to keep having them, honestly, fairly, and with balance, something that the Swiss respect. And I'm honored to be working to further strengthen our long-standing ties, be they commercial, cultural, or people-to-people. From my own experience, I've seen how these important exchanges make our two countries even more innovative and prosperous and create lasting bonds among our people. I am here for you, the media. I recognize we both have an important job to do, and I am really looking forward to working with you over the next 3 years. When the President's reelected and he serves out his second term, I'm sure I won't be here for that, as I believe that a President should have ambassadors who come and then move on and bring in new talent and new ideas. Unless he makes a case that I really need to stay, I'm sure that I will do everything I can to work closely with you, transparently with you, and I really welcome that opportunity. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I thank you all for coming, and thank you who are joining us by video.
Thanks a lot, Mr. McMullen, for explaining how and why the power of our relations is so strong. I think it was a good overview of our relationships. Yes, now we will open the floor to questions. Yes, Laurent.
Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency. So speaking of trade, Switzerland was among the voices that raised concern and also sometimes critics after Donald Trump's presidential decision on steel and also on solar cells. So do you think there might be a risk of potential leverage of the good relationship on a sustainable way between the two countries because of that? And a quick second question. Geneva is quite often mentioned as a possible venue for a possible Trump-Kim Jong-un summit. Have you been asked by the president to prospect in that direction?
Oh, there we go. I'll start with that question first. I don't discuss the conversations I have with the president, but I can assure you the Swiss have made it very clear that that the Swiss have a very keen interest and the good offices and opportunities for conversations here in Switzerland. It is no secret to the U.S. government that that is true and that the opportunities are here, particularly in Geneva. And I have made sure that the administration is aware of those opportunities and the interest from the Swiss. Again, that's a two-way talk, and it's also one that I'm fortunately not having to be engaged in. I'm here in Switzerland, engaged in Swiss relations, but we've made it very clear that the offer's there, and it's a serious one, and it would be a good opportunity. I have not heard anything as far as those talks continue. On the trade front, I think it's very important early on when the president issued his proclamations on trade and the dumping from the Chinese, which was the real focus of that trade direction. He has made it very clear that we don't need to escalate the conversation in a way to create trade wars or speculate on trade wars. That is not the intent of those proclamations. The intent is very clear. National security of the United States is in jeopardy, and aluminum and steel must be addressed, and the dumping that has been ongoing for almost a decade must be addressed. Previous presidents have attempted to do that. There has been no result. This president has actually taken the bull by the horns and is making sure that there will be results. That is the objective, that is the focus, and I think it's very important that we continue to take heed of the president and the administration's direct, clear language that this is not an escalation, it is not meant to be a trade war or cause any other collateral damage, which is why the president has included in there opportunities for a bifurcated exchange, where if there is a country exemption, where countries can seek to be exempted from the tariffs, and then there are also product exemptions, where there are countries or businesses doing business in the United States that have a specific type of aluminum or steel that they need to continue to get access to. And those product exemptions also give way to a process. And the good news is Mr. Schneider-Eman, who is a fantastic representative of Switzerland and the economic side of the Swiss interests, was in Washington this past week with Commerce Secretary Ross and had serious conversations about this and was assured that these considerations and this process would take its course and play its course. He was also assured that escalating the conversation into trade war language was not necessary or the objective of the administration. So from that meeting, I hear there were very positive indications that Switzerland is being taken seriously. The knowledge and understanding in the U.S. about the Swiss position and seventh largest foreign direct investor puts you in a very good position, I think, to make that case.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Oh.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, Paula Dupas from CNN Money Switzerland. You brought up the issue of the ambassadorships, that they should possibly move on. In your case, you're ready to perhaps step down, or you may step down, or perhaps possibly at the end of the four years. But here in Geneva, there are a number of positions that are still vacant. There have been issues in getting the ambassadors through the congressional hearings. Is there any signal that may be sent to Geneva in not moving forward and filling these positions?
Great question. The president has made it very clear that he has almost, I don't know the exact number, so don't quote me, but literally nearly hundreds of appointees that are awaiting confirmation. This burden is not on the president making the appointments, because once he decides to appoint, there's a whole long process that takes place that many appointees have been through. The ambassador to Germany, for example. The ambassador to Germany went through his hearing with me in, I guess it was late summer. I was approved, thankfully, very quickly. He continues to wait, as do several other ambassadors who are standing there with him. Now, I hear there's good news. I hear that the leadership in the House, the leadership in the Senate is actually working with the leadership on the minority side to try and get closure here. The President has made it clear that our ambassadors in Europe are fundamentally critical, and I've seen that in the short time in 6 months in Switzerland, helping answer the questions about what this administration is actually doing and trying to achieve, helping to work together with the governments. The ambassadors are critical, and I do think, yes, there is a clear desire of this administration to put closure on this. These are ambassadors who are waiting for very long periods of time. I met the new ambassador on trade who was approved this past couple weeks and is arrived in Geneva yesterday, Mr. Shea, Ambassador Shea. Fantastic guy, and I think many of you will get to know him here in Geneva. But there are more and more coming out. It can't come out fast enough for the president to be happy. I mean, it's now a year and plus, almost a year and a half through his first term. And it's time for the Senate to make that movement. And I think many of the Senates in both parties are recognizing they have to make that work. Yes, sir.
It was the same thing for the last ambassador. I remember when President Obama was elected, we had to wait 1 year or so.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate. That's not uncommon for about 6 or 8 months after the president's inaugurated, because you have a very long security process, disclosure process, everything that has to be done to get the approvals through, and then you have the hearings. Yeah. So it is a process that takes a while, but it's also, you know, Republicans and Democrats have used the advice and consent clause in the Constitution for political purposes, and that is not a good thing for foreign policy. And I think that both are starting to realize that it's a very important clause, but when it's used for political reasons, it diminishes its value, and that's not helpful to the process.
Good, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Ben. I work for the AFP news agency. I know you're not the WTO ambassador, but as you said, Mr. Shea just got here. We haven't met him yet, and you did talk a lot about free and fair trade. So do you mind a WTO question?
In the context of a bilateral conversation, sure.
No, it's more technical than that. So I'll ask something else. What is your level of concern?
Ask a question, and if I'm uncomfortable, because I'm not going to answer something I'm
sure.
involved in.
But it's just this. For all the issues around tariffs, steel and aluminum, etc., there's a lot of arguments on both sides. The one issue is the U.S. blocking the dispute settlement body at the WTO that nobody who I've spoken to can explain in any kind of rational way. To the extent that WTO officials do not trust the explanations that U.S. officials are giving them, it just seems to be a blanket blockage of any new judges on sort of the thinly explained premise that the DSB hasn't been fair to the United States, without any sort of caseload to support that argument. And I have tried to get clarity as to what the blockage is about, and I keep hitting a wall.
I think you're about to get clarity with the new ambassador, and honestly, I'm not briefed on these. This is not my area, and I wouldn't delve into a Geneva ambassador's role. But I think you're going to be impressed with a man who is very informed, very knowledgeable, and can get you the information you need.
Okay. So do you mind if I fire up one?
Sure. No.
When Switzerland unveiled its new cryptocurrency guidelines a couple of weeks ago, they acknowledged themselves that this is a very, very rough terrain and there isn't a lot of structure to guide this process. You know, I think a lot of people have been raising the concern that cryptocurrencies are an easy way for groups with ill intentions to move money around. Can you talk about your engagement with the Swiss on ensuring that there is some security and check and balance in the global cryptocurrency space?
I keep forgetting that. I can tell you that the Swiss government have been exceedingly helpful in working with us to ensure that any nefarious terrorist or illegal, ill-gotten gains, any issue where there are problems or concerns, the Swiss government has worked very closely with us to document and ensure that that does not move forward. And we have a great relationship in ensuring that. On the question of cryptocurrency, I think there are two issues. One is, what is cryptocurrency, and what types are good and what types are bad, because there are some that are very transparent reporting and very accessible with information, and there are others who aren't. And I think that debate continues to unfold. We really don't know how that's going to unfold. The technology is changing every day. The really amazing thing for Switzerland, where there are huge opportunities, is the technology on the blockchain front. Because the blockchain is the technology that's being built out to enable the currencies, the different currencies. I learned this weekend that there is a huge international corporation that uses blockchain technology to actually use its delivery of goods around the world. It's a administrative usage. The usages that are developing around the innovation in the Zug Valley and Liechtenstein, and these entrepreneurs who are looking for new ways to help crypto work, there's spin-offs that actually have amazing impacts and profitable impacts for business, which I think is going to be a huge new sector for Switzerland as it builds out new technologies. And the U.S. has a very serious interest. A lot of the investors in the U.S. see this value. So I hear regularly from Americans who are just fascinated by what's happening in the Zug Valley, with Liechtenstein, and I'm excited to see how this all plays out. But I can tell you that on the front of nefarious players, there's no patience, no tolerance, and the Swiss government has been fantastic in ensuring that that is not the case.
Thank you.
Excellency, thank you for your presence. I have just a kind of humoristic question. Is not so important for the destiny of the humanity. I met in the second on the floor in the Federal Palace 2 high-ranking American officers. I never saw this uniform. And some specialists told me this uniform is connected with the specialists of the astronomical phenomenon. And I don't know what happens, what is signified, which kind of cooperation. Is this scientific, military, or... Second question is, what is your position about Switzerland and NATO? Because America was adopted and engaged in the power atomic program in '54. It was a secret program, and since then, we don't know what happens. And a lighter question also, as ambassador to Liechtenstein, was it your work, your job? Ambassador envoy to Liechtenstein, what is your job? What is your work? And this is not too difficult.
It is, excuse me, it's an amazing honor to be able to be the ambassador to the Principality of Liechtenstein. I've been to Liechtenstein several times. I am amazed at a small country of 30,000 plus people building an economy the way that they're building it. And in the US, they are paying some of the highest wages in their industries that they invest in the US. So the U.S. has a very serious interest in Liechtenstein, not to mention that Forbes magazine just recently noted that Liechtenstein is going to be a key player in the blockchain crypto arena. Not to mention their banking, not to mention their manufacturing, not to mention there are some really, truly amazing entrepreneurs and investors who are interested in the U.S. So it's an honor for me to be able to help those in Liechtenstein understand that opportunity in the U.S., work with them on that front, but also to get to know the political players and, frankly, the princely family, who are some of the most entrepreneurial people I've met in Europe. They are not sitting in a castle having a good time. They're actually engaged in business, foreign affairs, and they are truly an amazing family. And it's a great honor for me to have that interaction with Liechtenstein. On the question of the astrological phenomenon uniform, I honestly have never heard of it. So,
Bluebird and condom program, you know, Professor Alan Hynek.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with it. I can do a little research and find out, and I don't want to trivialize your question, but I'm not familiar with it, and I've never. It's unusual for someone to be in Bern and meeting with the government where I wouldn't be somehow informed or involved in that. But I'm unfamiliar with it. Be happy to check into it and let you know if there is such a thing. On the question of NATO, I think, you know, the NATO alliance is very strong. The president has made it very clear that it needs to be realigned with everyone holding their responsibility and contributing as appropriate. And I'm really pleased to see the progress that the European ambassadors have made and the administration has made in getting us to those goals the president has set. As far as Switzerland is concerned, I think you know the question you have is the question: should Switzerland be in NATO? What was the question exactly?
No. How strong is the presence, pressure of United States on NATO?
Do you make pressure on Switzerland to be member of?
Oh no. This administration, and it was very clearly understood and conveyed in Davos during the bilateral conversations between President Berset and President Trump, the respect for the neutrality. The neutrality that Switzerland offers the world is a very important asset, particularly for us, as we see the interactions as our representative with Iran. In the past, there have been other interactions, and those are fundamental assets for us as Americans and, frankly, for the Iranians. Switzerland's neutrality provides that opportunity, and I would guarantee you that the administration is in no way pushing anyone into NATO and respects highly the unilateral and unanimity and neutrality of Switzerland.
So
Thank you.
For the NATO can be a non in favor of American politics? Est-ce que le patron, le secrétaire général de l'OTAN peut être un homme qui déplairait aux États-Unis?
Bon, c'est pas la question des relations bilatérales. Hein. Vous lui posez la question. No, he asked if Mr. Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, if at this post somebody who is not in friendship with United States can be at this post, but.
I'm not a NATO. Fortunately, I am not engaged in the NATO conversations because Switzerland is neutral. I very specifically try to stay out of those conversations.
Okay. No,
So, any other questions?
no, I think maybe because
yes,
we have
ma'am.
to leave now. So
Just quickly, you know, the period before you came was very rocky between the U.S. and Switzerland in terms of the contacts and the in banking and related to, you know, tax evasion, tax dodging. Do you think that period is firmly behind and that the U.S. is no longer trying to punish Swiss banks?
I can tell you unequivocally that that chapter is behind us. The Category 2 banks have settled everything and moved on. The Category 1s have a few banks that are still working with the Justice Department. Excuse me. On finalizing their details. I don't know. I'm not privy to those details. It's the Justice Department, different area of government from the executive branch. But, well, it is in the executive branch, but it's completely separated because it's the investigatory arm of the branch. But everything I've heard from talking to Swiss bankers in the private sector is that they are ready to move forward. And everything I've heard on the U.S. side is we are eager to move forward because there's so many opportunities and to dwell in what has been done and has been fixed and let that be any kind of impediment to moving forward is not in anyone's advantage. And so we are working very hard to move into the next chapter of our history and our relationship with Switzerland, and that is an extremely vibrant economy, mutual interests and values and principles that we share. And I think, we look forward to those opportunities. As I've said, it looks extremely bright as we look down the pike.
Thank you. Last questions.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for taking my question. I had a quick question about the Swiss banking system and kind of a follow-up on that. And I recall 1997 when I interviewed Carlo Giacometti, who was then the Swiss ambassador to the U.S., and there was some concern about the amount of pressure that was put on the banking system and its evolution. And I was wondering if you'd comment now on the exchange of information between the banking system between Swiss and the...
I've said from the beginning when I came to Switzerland that we are moving forward. Everything that points to that, whether you talk to bankers, government officials, this chapter is behind us. We're moving into a new chapter. And the one thing that I think is very important for us to all remember is that the Swiss banking system is built on brilliance, not secrecy. And so what I have seen Swiss bankers do, as they do in every industry, and the entrepreneurialism and the flexibility is truly amazing in how the Swiss entrepreneurs work, is they find new niches and new opportunities and move forward. They don't look back. They know there's no value, and there's no value in looking back. We're in a new world with banking internationally, and I think this is an extremely positive way to approach things, and I know that that's why Swiss banks, if you go to New York or any major city in the US, you can't go a block without hitting a UBS or a Credit Suisse. I mean, there's great confidence in the US in Swiss banks. And so that is very important. The Swiss banking system is built on brilliance. It's not built on secrecy, and that's how we move the countries forward.
So thank you, Mr. McMullen,
Yes, sir.
for your presence, for your speech, and for your answers to our questions.
Thank you.
We hope all the best for the following of your mission in Switzerland, and maybe we could have another opportunity to meet here during your...
I hope so.
Okay.
Anytime I can be helpful, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you all.
Okay.